To our top story now, and hundreds of people wrongly convicted in the Hewson scandal are to be exonerated under laws set to come into effect by the end of July, with the government saying the possible exoneration of some guilty people is a price worth paying.
But in a newly published letter sent last month, Post Office Chief Executive Nick Read told the Justice Secretary it stands by 369 convictions of Post Office operators and would oppose attempts to overturn them.
Our political correspondent, Alicia Fitzgerald, is still with us, and we're also joined by former Black Rod David Leakey. Hello to both of you. Alicia, let's just talk about this Post Office story and this announcement from Nick Hollingray yesterday, Kevin Hollingray, rather, yesterday, saying that all convictions were going to be quashed, which a lot of people will say is about time. But then we have this letter published from Nick Read of the Post Office saying, actually, the Post Office believes that more than half of those convictions are, in fact, valid.
Yeah, it's a bit of a messy situation between the two there. So we've had the government for a while kind of toing and froing about whether or not this is the right decision. Do they just overturn all victims of the Post Office scandal, or do they do it case by case? Lots of people really pressuring the government to exonerate everyone who was involved in the scandal just because this has been going on for so long. And the general kind of consensus was that even if there are a few people who maybe do slip through the cracks there, the overall outcome is better. But that's not to say that this has received no criticism at all. Lots of people saying that it's unfair,
and
including
Nick
isn't
Read. 369.
Well, exactly. It's a lot of people.
David, let's bring you in now, if we can. Would you like to comment on where we are and the government's position on this?
Yeah, the key word here is integrity. And it's a real dilemma for everybody involved in this. The start point was the integrity of the Post Office and the Fujitsu, the tech company that were running the Hewson system. Total lack of integrity on their part, and that's all been gone through, and that's what stimulated public reaction to make the Post Office and the government pay out the compensation and overturn the convictions. So that's the first part of integrity, and the Post Office has a duty to restore their integrity somehow and get public opinion back on their side. And politicians likewise want to do exactly the same thing. And public outcry is that integrity will be repaired a little bit if the postmasters are given their convictions are overturned and they're paid compensation. On the other hand, integrity of the justice system matters too. And there will be lawyers and the judiciary, no doubt, who will say that some of these convictions were right, and that if you just simply, on a sort of industrial scale, overturn the convictions without proper process, then the integrity of the justice system suffers too. So it isn't a straightforward thing. But in the end, I suspect that the politicians are just going to overrule this and say what matters is our reputation, political reputation, and we'll get over this. And this speaks. The political game, if you like, here speaks to the same issue over Lindsay Hoyle. I don't know whether you want to come on to that.
Yes, we do. We do. I mean, I wonder what you made, David, as you saw those scenes unfolding in the Commons on Wednesday night.
Comes back to integrity again, and the integrity of politicians and of Parliament, and that's been brought into question in the last few days. The integrity of the parties themselves for bringing up this issue and forcing the debate, in fact, forcing the farce, if you like, over Gaza. What was going on in the House of Commons before even Lindsay Hoyle got involved were party political games here, largely party political games, driven, in fairness, by a genuine political desire by the SNP to have a vote on a ceasefire. But what then happened was the Labour Party and the Tories got involved in party political games here to gain some party political advantage within the Westminster bubble. And that doesn't do the integrity or reputation of our Parliament any good, either domestically in this country or internationally, given the size of the catastrophe that is going on in Gaza itself. And that belittles Parliament, and it does its reputation no good. And that goes for Lindsay Hoyle too, because he got himself involved in the party political games. He should have stood above that and recognised the bigger picture. He's admitted he made an error of judgment. He didn't take the advice of his clerks, and that was a great mistake.
And David, that's the point, isn't it? He didn't take the advice he was given by the clerks, Alicia. So they were very clear to him, don't do what they did. But actually, David's point is really valid. These are party political games. Actually, the SNP started it because obviously by actually calling for that immediate ceasefire, that would have put Labour in a very difficult position, and they knew that.
Well, I was just going to say, I think David was very kind in saying that it was just the Labour Party and the Conservatives who engaged in political football. I mean, where all of this started was the SNP being accused of playing political football by even tabling this debate in the first place, because by doing so, they knew that it would create this big division within the Labour Party. And when you look at that tactically from the SNP, there's a big battleground in Scotland at the moment between the SNP and Labour. SNP did really well at the last election, not looking like they'll do so well this time. And Labour is set to sweep up a lot of their seats that will be crucial for the SNP in the next election. So there's a huge rivalry between those two parties at the moment.
And David, I mean, you know the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, well, and there is a genuine sense in Parliament that he's a decent and an honourable man who got something wrong. 36 hours on, he has apologised twice. But do you think he can restore confidence in his own abilities?
I do know Sir Lindsay Hoyle quite well, and there's been a lot of criticism of him, people writing little sort of biopics of him in the media. And people, there's a very good article in the Times this morning describing him and saying that he's developed some traits rather similar to those of John Bercow. But in fairness to Sir Lindsay Hoyle, not on the scale of John Bercow. John Bercow, remember, was described by a retired appeal court judge and the panel that heard his John Bercow's appeal against his charges of bullying, that John Bercow was a liar and a bully. And I don't think Sir Lindsay Hoyle comes into that category. On the other hand, Sir Lindsay Hoyle is vain. He is a bit of a narcissist. Which politician isn't, I suppose you could say, because that's what they need to do to get there. But he needs to eat a little bit of humble pie and be a bit more humble. And he might just get away with it this time, but he is now on notice. I think the interesting question, which hasn't come up yet, is, if you like, the Bercow question. If he is forced to retire or resign or step down, what will happen then? And the question I was asked yesterday was, will he go to the House of Lords? Will he get an automatic peerage? And it comes back to this business of integrity. If you are a senior figure, whether it's in politics or public life, the banana skins are huge. And if you tread on one and slip over, the fall is huge too.
But what does it say about integrity? What does it say about integrity if you reward that kind of behaviour by putting you in the upper house? Already people have a very low esteem of politicians generally. It also seems to be turning into a huge pantomime when you've got Stephen Flynn calling, "Where's the Speaker?" And then you've got Penny Mordaunt actually leaping to his defence.
And that's why I think that in the grand scheme of things, the parliamentarians over the weekend will come to a decision about whether Lindsay Hoyle has got to go. If the government are happy for him to stay, he'll stay, and he will limp on now, but as a humbler man. And I hope once someone who's everybody in Parliament, not just Lindsay Hoyle, but everybody will learn a little bit about integrity and about what really matters, and people doing the right thing at the right time,
David,
in the grander scheme of things.
Sorry to interrupt you. One final thought from you for this section. Just ahead of this debate, we had the statement released by the Prince of Wales about the situation in Israel and Gaza. Largely a humanitarian statement, but has been criticised by some as wading into politics. I wonder what you make of the heir to the throne making such a statement.
I think if you look carefully at the language he's used, his language has focused on the humanitarian situation, the human situation, not the political or the military situation. And it's worth saying here that I think a lot of people are missing the point too on the Gaza situation. What's happened in Gaza? I mean, it is brutal and cruel what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. And people question whether it's gone too far is now a disproportionate response to the attack on the horrendous attack on October the 7th, which can never be excused. But I think just look at the facts for a moment. Hamas have said in terms that they intend to continue conducting those sorts of attacks on Israelis in Israel. And Israel has a right to defend itself. Now, I'm not apologizing for their tactics in prosecuting the war, but there is a war. Hamas has declared a war on Israel. Israel has made its declared political aim to eradicate Hamas so that Hamas cannot continue to conduct attacks like October the 7th in Israel. The fact that the Israelis are conducting that mission in a brutal, cruel way may be a fact that they have no other way of doing it, and that's what they're going to do, and they're prosecuting that until they've finished it. I don't apologise for them, but that's just the facts of what they're doing.